Welcome everyone to part 2 of Couch Potato Diary. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for tuning in today. The focus on this one, the NHL's Western Conference, what's been going on so far this offseason, and some of the moves that have been happening, and basically just breaking it all down. We're going to go through every Western Conference team. If you're like, oh man, but I like an Eastern Conference team, that is over on part 1. So you can check that out wherever you are consuming this, whether it be YouTube or up on podcast. So let's get right into it and talk about the Western Conference in the NHL. The Anaheim Ducks will get us started, so we are firing away. They haven't done anything. Everyone is talking about how they might trade Zegras. It makes so much sense. Having Leo Carlsson and McTavish as your 1-2 down the middle seems like it sets you up perfectly for years down the road. They get, I've been Seneke. I've been screwing up his name the whole draft time, so apologies. But they've been getting, they get him in the draft. There's going to be a lot of focus, I think, put on the Demidov selection for them and for Chicago, who we'll talk about in a little bit. This is still a developing team. If they get something big for Zegras, like they aren't super far away. I think Troy Terry's a touch overrated. I think Vetrano is fine. Cutter Gauthier is interesting over on the left side, over on the first line. So they have some intriguing pieces. It feels like maybe they're not going to get good enough in time to have John Gibson be their starting goalie. So there's still a couple of tear down adjacent moves that this team could make, but they really aren't that far off. But in terms of what they have done this offseason, Seneke is a fine pick if you just ignore that Demidov was still out on the board. Up next, it is the Calgary Flames. This is one that obviously I pay relatively close attention to. For those of you who don't know, I worked in Calgary radio for 10-ish years, and then took a break imposed by them, and now I'm back talking about the Flames on the radio on a fill-in basis, but then I also do Game Over Calgary. So all of that blurb to be said, the Calgary Flames, I think, have had a really, really smart offseason so far. They have gone out and made a couple of additions that I think will make this team somewhat better. It's not, okay, well, get ready to party down the Red Mile, folks. They got Jake Bean. But this is a hockey team that went out and acquired a couple of pieces to fit in so that if the kids aren't ready to take a big jump this year, then they're not put into spots that they aren't ready for. At the same time, if one of the kids is ready, if Coronado is just undeniable, he has to be on the first line, I don't think it kills you to put Anthony Mantha on a third line with Backlund and Coleman and just do that thing until you trade Mantha for a second or whatever. And same thing goes with Bean, right? Excuse me. He will probably be a top 4 defenseman on this team to start the season. He is not a top 4 defenseman. So if Poirier is ready, even after missing a year of development basically last year, if Solovyov takes a step up, or one of their other kids is just ready to go, then he is 100% someone that you can have eating popcorn for 10, 15 games in a row, or be on your third pairing, or send down to the American Hockey League. And if he passes through waivers, then oh well. And if nothing else, you can trade him for a 6th year from now at the trade deadline or whatever. So they have brought in pieces that help fill spots that it seems might block a path, but they aren't so undeniable that you have to stick with them in those areas. But the big key for Calgary is always going to be Dustin Wolf as Jacob Markstrom moves on in a deal with the New Jersey Devils. I think a lot of Flames fans were hoping it would be that 24 first instead of a different one, because the Devils look now like they could be a juggernaut in the Eastern Conference. Go back to a preview on the Eastern Conference to find that one, because they look real good. I will tell you that for free. The draft, they get Zane Parekh. It seems like Calgary nailed the draft. Every pick, people were like, steal, amazing, fantastic pick. Parekh has so much offensive upside. He is so intriguing. And just on down the line, Gradin is something that is someone that people like. And just the further on you go, the more it seems people like this draft for the Calgary Flames. So they've done a good job of kind of stocking up. The Chicago Blackhawks are next, and they seem to realize that Connor Bedard is pretty good at hockey, so we should surround him with some pieces. I don't maybe love the term on some of these pieces, but this is a a year of, you know what, we're going to try to get better, play some meaningful hockey games. So let's go out, get Bertuzzi, get Teravainen. Those are a couple of players that when the Blackhawks get really good, you can fit in a Bertuzzi, you can fit in a Teravainen on your second line or on your third line as maybe some more prospects develop or they go out and make a couple of bigger moves. Those are guys that can fill in down, and the cap number isn't so egregious that it would be horrendous if they played on your second line. But you look at, like, they get those guys. They get Taylor Hall, who was injured very early last season. This is an okay hockey team. Like, they are going to, I think, take a bit of a step. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team in a competitive Western Conference, but they're going to be a team that is going to be a difficult out on a night-in, night-out basis, and they're going to be a team that I think next year is going to be, like, the marquee free agent destination here. They go out in the draft and get Levushinov. Again, apologies for the pronunciation. I didn't do a ton of draft stuff this year. Meant to, want to for next year, but that's a thing down the line. And again, very intriguing as a defender. He can really be like a high-end number one cat for them, and that is great. Again, the thought of Demidov with Connor Bedard for the next 15 years would have been really enticing, but they elect to go on the blue line. I think that's fine. On to the Colorado Avalanche, who haven't really done a whole lot. They are right up against the cap. They have huge question marks when it comes to Landeskog's availability, Nichushkin's availability, as he's still in player assistance, whatever is going on with him at this time. I think the Brandstrom signing is a really, really, really good one, but this, for a team that is as capped out as they are, with some obvious issues that they have going on, this doesn't scream Stanley Cup threat to me. That blue line is really good. Taves and Makar are the best defensive pairing in the National Hockey League. Gerard and Manson are very good. Georgiev as a goalie is fine. And you still have one of the best players in the world in Nathan McKinnon. And maybe the best... no, maybe Connor McDavid. We'll stick with one of the best players in the world. Kind of blanked on that one for a second. My bad. But yeah, like, you have one of the best players in the world and one of the best lines in the world with Drouin and Rantanen. So this isn't going to be a team that falls out or anything like that. But they need some help at forward to make this thing go. And I wonder, again, looking at it from a Flame standpoint, you wonder if they're like, hey, so Middlestad or Lehkonen, you know, if you want to take $4 million off your books and free up some space, you let us know. I don't know if those would be the first two choices. I'm just saying from a Calgary standpoint, that's what you'd be looking at. But I do think that, like, this is still a really, really good hockey team. It's just, I don't know if they are good enough. The Dallas Stars, they were very close to being good enough a season ago as they fall in the Western Conference Final. They lose Chris Tanev and replace him with Lyubushkin, Smith, and Dumba. And I don't think that's enough. Now, you roll out there with a starting defensive pairing of Harley, Heiskanen, and then follow that with Lindell and Lyubushkin. You are still very good on the blue line. And Onger is still really, really good. It does feel like Tanev was the last piece to, like, a championship puzzle, but this roster, as it sits right now, because of how talented that forward group can be, I think that this is still a team that can be a Stanley Cup threat and a real Stanley Cup contender coming out of the Western Conference, even if this offseason hasn't really treated them in such a way. The Tanev loss does kind of sting. I do think they understood it was just going to be a rental. But I don't know if they've replaced that. Now, whole rest of the offseason, I don't anticipate them doing a whole lot, but trade deadline and whatnot, you can make that stuff work. The Edmonton Oilers have had a very good offseason. They're up next year. They go out and bring in Skinner coming off of his buyout. Arvidsson, which I think is just the perfect depth guy for Edmonton here. There's some talk that it would just be Skinner, Draisaitl, Arvidsson on your second line. Sure, sign me up. That team, that line might give up a bunch, but they are a really, really talented forward group. And, like, one of the strengths of this team on that run toward Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Final was some of the forward depth at times. Now, you were hoping it would get better, maybe in some different points, but there was some concern they would lose that because so many guys were available in free agency. They do lose Fogle, they do lose McLeod, but you still keep Janmark around. Brown is still around. Derek Ryan, I think, is a really important piece that didn't get talked about enough last year. And then you keep Henrique and Holloway. Like this is, well, we'll see about Holloway. He's an RFA, but probably Holloway. This is a very, very scary team. My one issue is this blue line still is lacking from a championship level. And again, they got to within 2 goals of winning the Stanley Cup. So they aren't super far away from being a Stanley Cup contender by any stretch. They are one, legitimately. But if they wanted to get over that hump, I just feel like there is another defenseman or two that needs to be brought in for this Edmonton Oilers group. The LA Kings are up next. I said in the Eastern Conference one, I was going to bring this up here. This is addition by subtraction. Getting Pierre-Luc Dubois the fuck out of town is so important for the LA Kings and what they're trying to do. They go out and get a goalie in it in Darcy Kemper. We will see if he can get it back on track, and maybe fix something between the pipes for them. They get Fogle as well. I still think like they are fine down the middle with Kopitar, Deneau, Turcotte, and Lewis. They are fine. There still needs to be a touch more scoring on this team, and maybe probably another defenseman or two. Like they aren't a Stanley Cup contender, but getting away from PLD makes them closer to being one than they were when this offseason started. So I think that was a really good move for them. The Minnesota Wild have reached the point in the Suter-Parise buyouts where it has become untenable now. As this is the last year of it. It goes from a $14 million buyout penalty to a $1.6 million buyout penalty next season. That's easier to work around for sure, and I think they will be able to, but they've basically done nothing this entire offseason to a team that probably wasn't good enough already. So their big boost is getting an extra $13 million in salary cap space for next season, and hopefully being able to really put something around Kaprizov and Rossi, because this is a fun core that they have built. They just need to be able to build on it. Speaking of building, holy hell, the Nashville Predators. They go out and they get Stamkos, they get Marchessault, and they get Shea. Maybe a little more than they should have paid for Shea. But still, that one is one where, look, they're obviously all in now. Worry about the later on that one. I think they are all the way in right now. Again, I don't like that Shea contract. It might put them in a bit of a tough spot down the road. But putting him with Roman Josi, I think pretty good defensive pairing, that's for sure. And then the forwards, like this team was such a one-line team last year. And the fact that that one line was able to do so well with them being the focal point of every defensive game plan is incredible. And now when you have basically gone out and bought a really good second line with Stamkos, Marchessault, and probably Novak down the middle, this is a team that is ready to contend. Are they a championship team? I think they are just a notch away from being that, and that notch is probably a really good second line center. If they're able to get that, then this team is complete, and they are able to really make a strong run. And as it sits right now, they're going to be a problem in the NHL, in the Central Division, and in the Western Conference. So bravo to them for going out and just getting after it here in free agency and putting together a team that is legitimately a contender now. We move on to the San Jose Sharks. They've made actually a few really smart moves. Obviously, the draft was going to be their big thing this offseason as they bring in Macklin Celebrini, the apple of everyone's eye in free agency. In the draft, he is going to be such a fun, electric player for the San Jose Sharks. And they recognized they needed to build around him. And this is not a team that is ready to break out in any way, shape, or form. But I think they've done really, really well. Sorry, I'm skipping over it. They get Sam Dickinson in the draft as well. There is a world, maybe not the most realistic, but there is a world they got the two best players in this draft. Like I think Sam Dickinson is so talented, such a great skater, all the things you heard about him in the draft process. I think there is a world where he turns into the number 2 prospect in this draft, and they get both of them. Now, again, it's not likely, but they get 2 very, very, very good prospects in this draft, and then they go out. They acquire Tyler Toffoli, who is, I think, the perfect guy to play alongside Macklin Celebrini. And then some pretty good depth moves. They bring in Wenberg, who I think is interesting down the middle. They bring in Barclay Goudreau and Ty Dellandrea for nothing. The Dellandrea one, I couldn't believe that. I think he is the perfect bottom 6 forward for a team that is looking to contend. And for him to be like... This is a pairing that could last for a really, really long time. And then Goudreau, again, championship pedigree, all of that. In terms of a bottom 6 player, fantastic. So I love his addition there. Again, this team is so far away from being a good team, but they have put in a couple of interesting building blocks moving forward this offseason out in San Jose. In Seattle, they've decided to go for it, and a lot of people are criticizing the horses they've bet on. Look, I like the two players they brought in quite a bit. I have said for a long time, Chandler Stevenson is the type of player you win with, and when we were looking at some of the Canadian teams, like a Vancouver or a Toronto, in needing some of that depth forward punch, that playoff experience, those guys, again, that you win with, I thought he was perfect for them. At nowhere close, though, to the dollar amount and the term that he got out in Seattle. I think that he is a number 3 center on a championship team. He's getting paid like a number 2 and borderline a number 1. And that's just, I think you are needing now best case scenario out of him to get there. And again, I love the player so much. It pains me to say that. But yeah, he's getting paid, and probably amount that makes it difficult to fit when you look at getting this team really good. And for Montour, like there is 100% a world where he earns this contract in its entirety. Like he's still really, really good. And not that Stevenson isn't either, but he is really good and has a skill set that I think can kind of age pretty well as this deal goes along. They go out and make these moves, and now they look like a team that could make some noise in the Pacific Division. They need the goaltending with Grubauer and Decord to kind of work. Dunn, Larson, Alexiak, and Montour on your blue line is good. McCann, Beniers, Eberle, Schwartz, Stevenson, and Burakovsky, Gord on your third line. Like that, they have a lot of good on this team. I think there's a lack of great that is going to keep them from being a team that does too much this season. But like, if you're looking at it from a Seattle standpoint, maybe Vancouver falls off. Maybe there's a hangover in Edmonton. Vegas we'll get to in a little bit. They lost a ton, including a guy to you. Like, the Pacific Division didn't get a whole lot more difficult this offseason. So I think they are kind of hoping they can be the banana peel that one of these teams slips on, and that they are able to work their way in. Up next is the St. Louis Blues. I have questions about this team. They go out and sign Pavel Buchnevich to a 6-year, $8 million a year contract. And for Buchnevich, I have liked him for a very long time. This contract works. He is 100% an $8 million player. I don't have a clue why he wants to stay in St. Louis, and I don't know why they want to keep him. This is a team that I think should be building around Neighbors, Thomas, and Kyrou. And I guess you have a good second line in Saad, Buchnevich, and Shen, but this is a team that just screams middle. Bennington is fine. This blue line is getting worse, but is fine. Their depth forwards aren't very good. And like their top 6 is fine. If Neighbors, Thomas, and Kyrou all take big steps forward, then this team can maybe be a team that threatens for a wild card spot. And they were kind of this year, but I don't think anyone took them overly seriously as a real threat. And they haven't gone out and improved on anything. So this whole thing looks like a middle of the road team to me out in St. Louis. Then you have Utah Hockey Club. They made one of the big moves of the draft by acquiring Mikhail Sergachev. They've also signed Juuso Välimäki to help out on a blue line. This is an interesting team to me. And I think there is some like, oh, that's cute. Oh, yeah, they Utah HC, blah, 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 whatever. I think these guys could be a playoff team this year. And there's, like, we're going to have to go through it when we get to the preview coming up in September. But this is a team that I think can actually do some damage here. That blue line with Sergachev, Durzi, Välimäki, and Marino, that's pretty good. And then your top 6 of Keller, Hayton, Schmaltz, Cruz, Cooley, and Gunther. It's not the best, but there's a lot of talent there. And this team was hanging around a playoff spot before their entire lives felt like they were getting turned upside down for a few months in the where is this team going to play. Now that they're going to be in a legitimate hockey arena with a legitimate hockey owner, I do think that there is actually something to this team this year. The Vegas Golden Knights, a rare offseason for them. It's been quiet. And quite frankly, they've lost more than they've brought in this offseason. I think they kind of understood that when they made the move to get Hurdle and to get Hannafin, that this probably meant that Stevenson for sure was out the door. I remember I had Frank Saravelli on 960 talking about like, oh yeah, like Marchessault and Stevenson, these are two really intriguing pieces they're going to hit the market, and it kind of sounded like they're going to really try to keep Marchessault. That now, him leaving doesn't mean they didn't really try to keep him. It just maybe means Nashville outbid them for him. But it's still interesting to see, like, that is the heart and soul of this team gone. And they still have heart and soul type of players. Carlson is still there. Stone is perpetually a heart and soul type of a guy. I kind of get the feeling Pietrangelo and McNabb are as well. Whitecloud as well. Like, this is still a really, really talented hockey team. But we saw how important depth was in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I think Vegas has kind of had that whittled away on them. And they haven't been around long enough, and they haven't used their draft picks enough to rebuild that depth. So I think Vegas, again, will be very good, and in their range of outcomes is winning the Stanley Cup. I just think that they're going to need best case scenario from a lot of guys to be able to do that. And then we get to the Vancouver Canucks. Sorry, I went out of order there for a second. I missed them. Vancouver goes out and gets Jake DeBrusk, who I like a lot and I think is an excellent fit. Vancouver scoring just went away in the postseason, and Jake DeBrusk does not go away in the postseason. I think, again, maybe this is overvaluing a little bit, but when you go into the playoffs with Heinen, Miller, Besser, Höglander, Pettersson, and DeBrusk as your top six, with Joshua Bluger and Garland, which was their best line on a lot of nights. Podkolzin is still a fourth liner on this team, but maybe has some room to move up if he starts to really progress the way that Vancouver thought he would in a little bit. This is a very good forward group, and still a team that I think, the President's Trophy, maybe not, but this is a team that can absolutely still go out and win the whole thing. I worry about the blue line still. Like, they have some good depth guys here. Going out and getting Forbort, going out and getting Desharnais. Those are good depth pieces. Those are pieces that are going to be starting every day, and a second pair of Soucy and Myers still isn't good enough to really get this team where they need to get to. They needed to get one of the Tanevs or something like that. They need to try to figure out a way to make some kind of a splash in the defensive market around the trade deadline, because if they want to get to the ultimate prize of the Stanley Cup Championship, that blue line, I do think, is the missing puzzle piece. And much like we did out east, we end with a flourish in the west. Or not. It is Winnipeg. More offseason talk about what they haven't done. Monahan leaves. That was maybe a bit of a luxury purchase anyway, but a good one to try to make a playoff push. That push ended in 5 games in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And now you are left with a team that, again, is good, but still probably needs a second-line center. I like the goaltending a lot. Obviously, Hellebuck's really good. The defense is fine, but again, the main question, the main offseason thing, this team has not added to a team that wasn't good enough, and it feels like Nashville's absolutely past these guys, and I don't think they've caught up to Colorado, and they certainly had a long way to go to catch up to Dallas, so there's 3 teams that are ahead of them, so that now you're competing for a wild card spot. I don't know what's going to happen with the Oilers deal. We'll see what happens with McGrody. But they need to get like something legitimate back to help this team get over the hump. Because right now, it just feels like there's a lot of cars passing them by out on the highway. All right, that is it for the Western Conference offseason recap. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Again, part 1, wherever you are consuming this, is the Eastern Conference breakdown. So check that out wherever you either get podcasts or watch it here on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe wherever you're consuming this. Like it if you're watching. Review it if you're listening. Follow me on social media. I am at Primetime Klein, and I will talk to all of you next week. Have a great weekend, everybody.